How is it that Rome has an independent state? And what role did Mussolini play in its creation? So let's talk about the main stages in the history of the Vatican. Vatican in ancient times. Since time immemorial, the Vatican was called the territory on the right bank of the Tiber, where St. Peter's Basilica, the palaces and gardens of the Pope are located now. And why did this territory get such a name? I know two versions on this question. According to the first viewpoint, in the time of the Etruscans, even before Christ, there was a temple here dedicated to the god Vaticanus. He had the gift of predicting the future. The word vaticinator means soothsayer or seer. The priests of this god were called vates. Thus, from this deity, the territory received its name Vatican. According to the second version, here on the right bank of the Tiber lived a man who predicted the future, e vaticinator. He inspired the Romans to expel the Etruscans from here and become masters of this territory. That's where the name Vatican City came from. We have sorted out the name and also found out that at first this territory belonged to Etruscans, then it was occupied by Romans. Now we move to the I century AD. Vatican City in the 1st century AD. Here on the right bank of the Tiber, a villa was built for Agrippina and her son, the scandalous Emperor Caligula, 37 to 41 years, ordered to erect a circus nearby. In ancient times, circuses were called hippodromes where chariot races were organized. After Caligula, Claudius became emperor, and then Nero, 54 to 68 years. During Nero's reign, according to one version, I know another, St. Peter was crucified in this circus. Christians buried Peter's body on Vatican Hill, where there was a pagan cemetery. The third important phase in the history of the Vatican is the 4th century, when Emperor Constantine, 306 to 337, came to power. I call him a revolutionary because he is the first emperor to embrace Christianity. In 313 in Mediolanum, the ancient name of Milan, Constantine issues an edict on the freedom of Christian worship. This was a turning point in the history of the Roman Empire. If earlier Christians were persecuted, now they got an opportunity to preach openly. The first Christian basilicas began to be built. At the burial place of St. Peter, a basilica was erected in honor of this apostle and named after him. True, this basilica of the IV century has not survived to our time. St. Peter's Cathedral, which you see now, was built in the 16th, 17th centuries. The fourth important phase in the history of the Vatican is the Middle Ages. At the end of the 5th century, namely in 476, the Roman Empire ceased to exist and a period of feudal fragmentation began. The entire vast territory of the former empire was divided into many principalities. In Rome and the surrounding territories, the Church and the Pope have a huge influence. Gradually, in the center of Apennine Peninsula, the papal area, the state of the Pope, is formed, and Rome fulfills the function of the main city and stronghold of power of the pontiff. This position was maintained until 1870. Why? What happened in this year? I'll tell you in a moment. The fifth significant milestone is the Risorgimento. At the beginning of the XIX century, the process of uniting Italy into a single state began, which was called Risorgimento. As a result of this movement, on September 20, 1870, the troops of King Victor Emmanuel I captured Rome, and the Pope, it was the ill-fated Pius IX, flees behind the walls of the Vatican. Thus arose the most famous conflict in Italian history. The Pope was left without a state. The papal province ceased to exist, and Rome in 1871 became the capital of the United Kingdom of Italy. Can you imagine? This conflict lasted almost 60 years. The period of Mussolini's rule. Only in 1929, during the reign of Mussolini on February 11, the Lateran agreements were signed, according to which Vatican became an independent state of Vatican City. On the Italian side, these agreements were signed by Benito Mussolini, and on the Vatican side by Cardinal Gasperi. Vatican City is the smallest state in the world, with an area of only 44 hectares, less than 1 square kilometer, and it is located entirely on the territory of Rome. So why did they create the Vatican? It turns out that this is a functional state. There is no common nationality in it. We can say that it was formed artificially to resolve the conflict between Italy and the Pope. And the merit of Mussolini is that he cut this Gordian knot.